So hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Welcome to our press conference on the recent increase of trade-related job loss in California. My name is Will Wilchko. That's spelled W-I-L-T-S-C-H-K-O. I'm the director of the California Trade Justice Coalition, which is a statewide coalition of labor, environmental, and community organizations working together to improve U.S. trade policy. I'm going to moderate today's event, and I'll start with a brief overview of our new report's findings. And then I'm going to turn it over to Steve Smith of the California Labor Federation, and then after that, Robert Longer of the Communication Workers of America, District 9. And they're going to help explain what the numbers mean to California's working families and communities in real terms. So after they've both had a chance to speak, we'll open it up for your questions and comments. For our report, we compiled and reviewed data from the federal government's Trade Adjustment Assistance Program, known by the acronym TAA. TAA provides extended unemployment benefits to a subset of workers that the Department of Labor certifies as having lost their jobs to offshoring or displacement by imports. So the Labor Department data is more reliable than most of the job loss and job creation numbers because it provides a hard count of actual jobs lost at actual work sites rather than just relying on economic modeling to come up with an estimate. But having said that, TAA significantly undercounts the total number of trade-related job losses, both because the program only covers certain types of jobs and because someone needs to proactively complete a detailed application for displaced workers to receive TAA assistance. So with that in mind, the California TAA numbers are still really concerning. And the most troubling trend that we uncovered in our analysis is that trade-related job loss has been on the rise in recent years. So California experienced a 123% increase in trade-related job loss over the last 3 years in comparison to the 3 years before that, with 26,375 job losses certified for TAA under petitions filed between 2017 and 2019, compared to 21,507 between 2014 and 2016. So California also experienced a 158% increase in trade-related job loss in 2019 over 2018. So perhaps less surprising, the analysis also confirms that California experienced the highest overall trade-related job loss out of any state in the country over the past 3 years. And this increase in trade-related job loss has been felt throughout the state. Over 50 cities and towns in California were faced with more than 100 trade-related layoffs in the past 3 years. Large cities to small cities and towns. So cities like Chula Vista, Los Angeles, Menlo Park, Simi Valley, Southgate, Stockton, Sun Valley, Sylmar, Thousand Oaks, Tracy, Tustin, West Sacramento, Watsonville. It's a really widespread problem. And the growing number of trade-related layoffs in California over the last 3 years is particularly remarkable, since this is occurring during a period when government officials are claiming to have taken action to balance international trade and protect American jobs. In point of fact, the US trade deficit in goods has actually increased in recent years, reaching over $852 billion in 2019, according to data from the US Census Bureau. California's own trade deficit in goods was almost $235 billion in 2019. That's California by itself. So if California is going to stop hemorrhaging more and more jobs overseas, week after week and year after year, we need our federal officials to first stop adopting pro-offshoring policies like January's US-China trade deal. And we need to second, get serious about prioritizing the needs of working families in trade negotiations. It sounds like common sense, but we still have a long way to go before our policymakers actually push for these things. So this report is more than just numbers. Each of these jobs lost could easily represent a family losing their main source of income. These numbers represent human beings in our state. So to describe what California's increase in trade-related job loss means for real people, let me first turn it over to Steve Smith, the communications director for the California Labor Federation. So Steve.
There we go. Thank you, everybody. I'm Steve Smith, spokesman for the California Labor Federation. We're an umbrella organization for 2.1 million union workers in the state of California. Trade is an issue that we've worked on as a labor federation for many, many years, going back decades to NAFTA and even before. I want to be clear about something. We are not anti-trade. We think trade is a vital part of the global economy, but there's a right way and there's a wrong way to do it. In America, we've been doing it the wrong way for far too long. And that has consequences because we are allowing for corporations to write the rules of trade and not giving workers a voice. We have seen millions of jobs lost. And this latest report just underscores what that means to us in California. You know, I was deeply troubled to learn that offshoring in California has been on the rise under the Trump administration, although I would also say not surprised. I know that each one of these 26,375 California jobs actually represents a real person, a real family struggling to make ends meet. And that struggle has only become all the more difficult given the pandemic we're all facing now. For the families that are directly affected, these trade-related job losses mean less income, a cutoff of benefits like healthcare or perhaps retirement, and also increased stress and anxiety, which has just been multiplied by the pandemic and the economic turndown that has resulted. Even with job retraining, we can see, you know, it take many years for trade displaced workers, particularly older ones, to find new employment that pays them comparable wages. In fact, many workers who have lost their jobs as a result of trade never are able to find another job of comparable income. And they're, as a result, forced to accept lower paying work just to survive, if they can find it at all. And as we all know, unemployment has spiked. Jobs are even tougher to come by in this environment. And if they're lucky enough to find good paying jobs, they often lose seniority and other benefits, things like paid sick days or vacation that all workers should have. So while the families whose livelihoods are destroyed and are obviously hit the hardest, our broader community is not immune. We're hurt when large numbers of jobs are shipped overseas. That's less money for people to spend in local businesses like restaurants and hair salons and auto dealers. It's less tax revenue that we need to pay for our schools and safety and other public services and infrastructure. And there's also a real downward pressure on wages and benefits for the jobs that are left. Again, just made worse by the pandemic and the recent economic downturn. So among all other serious problems, this just exacerbates inequality in our state, disproportionate impacts on people of color and Latino workers who are typically paid less for the same work than white workers as it is, and who on average have considerably less savings and face higher unemployment levels. I appreciate the work that Will and the California Trade Justice Coalition does in shining a spotlight on these issues. And I'll just close by saying this. It's bad enough that California is the hardest hit state in the country by offshoring. But the fact that shipping those jobs overseas has been on the rise here in recent years is absolutely unacceptable. Look, we know what the negative impacts of bad trade policy are. There is no reason that we shouldn't fix those policies so that they work for workers and businesses alike. California's working families simply deserve better than the status quo. Will, back to you.
Thanks, Steve. Let me next invite Robert Longer, staff representative for CWA District 9, to present.
Hello, everybody. I'm Robert Longer, as Will said, with the Communications Workers of America, CWA. And we know firsthand how job loss has an impact on our members, as well as members in the unionized workforce sector in both public and private sector. but also the larger community. This is about people, as Steve mentioned, not just numbers. So while those 26,375 certified TAA job losses represent a large chunk of people, we know that it's much larger than just those individuals. In fact, in a recent Economic Policy Institute study with regard to the ripple effect of job losses, we know it's not just about the individual who loses their job, it's also about the larger community who suffers along with them. For every manufacturing job that's lost, for example, about 7.4 other jobs are lost because of the ripple effect, the supply chain, and the folks that serve and provide, from anything from providing meals and goods and services in the process of manufacturing to the other jobs that are interlinked and intertwined in that process. This also applies to other sectors, retail, as well as other types of workers. So I just wanted to make sure that people understand that it's much larger than just the individual who's impacted. But speaking of the individual, as Steve mentioned, you know, these workers, especially union workers who are impacted, have a long-standing roots in their community. They've developed seniority in their workplaces. They have, you know, been bringing in good wages and benefits to provide for their family and not just themselves as well. And so when people are uprooted from a job and work is sent overseas, it's really devastating to not just their pocketbook, but also to, you know, their mentality and their work ethic. When they go back into the workplace, especially now in COVID pandemic times, where we've been absolutely decimated with, you know, an estimated 50 million people out of work. Trade just exacerbates that when you have jobs that are offshored, and you know, it's still happening. It's still happening even in the midst of pandemics. We're seeing these shutdowns occur, and so these have a lot of other effects that are microcosms of systemic issues in our society as well. Disproportionately affecting African American and Latinx workers, as Steve mentioned. And it also has impacts on the family unit as well. You know, if folks are actually lucky enough to get back into the workforce, of course, they're starting at more of an entry-level point more often than not. And so this doesn't give them and provide them the same quality of life, and also doesn't put the same revenues back in vis-a-vis the tax base to the local economies. So everybody is really hurt in this process of offshoring and job loss. It's unfortunately not just centered around the individual, has a much larger effect than the 26,375 folks who lost their jobs due to trade in California.
Thanks so much, Robert. So before I open things up to questions, let me just say the reasons for California's increase in trade-related job losses likely vary. But before things get better, we need the federal government to stop making things worse. Not only have federal officials failed to rectify the underlying causes of the country's long-term trade imbalances, actions they have taken in recent years have actively promoted more offshoring. So let me cite the first two of the most noteworthy examples. So first, in December 2017, there was a tax law that actively incentivized the offshoring of California's manufacturing jobs. So one of the many ways the so-called Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 reduced taxes for big corporations was by creating a significantly lower tax rate for firms that move production from the United States to other countries. Under the new tax law, if a US company paid 21% or a 21% federal corporate tax rate on profits from goods made in California, their income earned offshore would be taxed at only a 10.5% rate. This is a major incentive for corporations to move production abroad. So that's one example of how federal policy is incentivizing offshoring. Another example is that the recent US-China trade deal actually makes it safer for big corporations to outsource California jobs. So large sections of the so-called Phase 1 China trade deal signed in January 2020 were about making the relocation of jobs to China safer for big employers, neglecting to even mention, let alone address, abysmal labor rights, forced labor, weak environmental standards, and related causes of outsourcing to China. The top bullets in the US Trade Representative's fact sheet on this deal were about protecting intellectual property and stopping technology transfer, which were items that large corporations demanded in order to feel more secure in moving their production to China. So to end trade-related job loss in California, the federal government needs to stop adopting new pro-offshoring measures like the ones it has pursued in recent years. And then it needs to get serious about putting the interests of working families at the center of trade negotiations. We should protect existing jobs in California, build new markets for California goods and services, and lift wages at home and abroad with trade policies that mandate strong, internationally recognized labor and environmental standards with swift and certain enforcement mechanisms. We also need to explicitly allow for joint labor activities across borders, including collective bargaining, and we should be much more serious about enforcing bans on forced labor. We also need to support the creation of new jobs and industries with trade policies that explicitly allow for public procurement, tariff, investment, and other industrial policies. The growing trade-related job loss in California is not inevitable, but it's not going to change unless our trade policies change. So with that said, let me open it up to questions. If you have a question, please type out question in the Q&A section, and I'll get to you and I'll unmute you. Or if you're attending via phone, you could text me if you have any questions. So I'll wait a few seconds to see if anyone has questions. All right, let me just. Check. Okay. All right, it looks like we don't have any questions right now, but if anyone's watching this after the fact, please feel free to email me if you have any questions. My email is will@citizenstrade.org. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you to our panelists, Robert and Steve, and have a good day, everyone. Bye.